Okay, so today we are really going to get stuck into this. You can hear a bit of noise and wind in the background. We are expecting a very serious storm in our little corner of the world, so I apologise for the wind noise. But today, first up I guess, this needs some bracing. It's pretty thin when used in that sort of profile. So these are just the ends that we cut off here, and we've just marked them up quickly and we're going to weld them in there. We are also going to section the body. Now we're only going to section it, maybe we'll start, I guess, about 5 millimeters, just under 1/4 of an inch here. And obviously, as you know, a little bit of movement here will be a lot of movement here, and that should hopefully get us our caster angle that we need for our front spindles. So with that said, let's get cutting, and then we'll come back to the next stage. Alright, so it's time to chop this. 1, 2, 3. Alright, so now we've got that bent and cranked, we can see just how much play we've got here. When I say play, that's how much angle we've got. So I think that'll be okay. It's time to weld up these kingpin holders, and then we'll get to work on building a little sump and finishing off this steering. So we can see here that the centre line of this rim, as you can see here, lines up really well with the centre line of this axle. So we're going to have to mount these down quite low, which means we're going to set them up quite, these spindle carriers up quite high. And that means that the centre line of the axles will be roughly the same, which means we should have a good amount of caster built in from the frame chop, and we'll also have our axles roughly on the same plane. So wish us luck, here we go. Okay, so here we are, welded up, pretty much ready to go. One thing I'm really not a fan of is being agricultural where I don't have to be. So for example, it'd be really easy to take something like this, cut it in half and just kind of weld it in there. But again, it's a little bit, I don't know, yeah, agricultural, there's really no other way to put it. My idea is really to take one of these, which is one of the very big washers I took off the centrifugal clutch spacing, and cut it into quarters, and then I'm going to weld it on the top there. Sorry, it's really hot, so I don't want to touch it. And I'm also going to weld it this way as well to help stabilize that. I think that's just, you know, a bit more interesting, a little bit more pretty. And yeah, leave some comments if you don't like it, or if you can think of better suggestions. Cheers. 1, 2, 3. So not that I'm entirely sure that I think they'll be needed, but you know, they'll sit in there. Not that I'm entirely sure that they'll be needed, but they'll just sit in there like this and just give it an extra bit of bracing. I may even run like a 1-2 scenario. We'll see how we go. But now let's take another one of these and we'll fit it like this. So we've got to come square down from the corner and square across the top like this. So we'll cut along those blue lines there, and that'll give us the reach that we need. And we place it over the top, and that should really help this resist bending and flexing too much in that point. Yeah, time to get cutting again. So it's funny how things work out. This little one here was what I was originally going to use, but I was cutting this one out here, so this is what I wanted to use on the top as a nice sort of round brace, I guess. To stop it flexing, but what was left over was this one, which also had 90-degree angles. So I'm going to weld that one in there, and I think that looks pretty cool. Obviously I'll clean these welds up, but yeah, I think that adds a bit of point of interest to the front end for no other reason than just because I can. All tacked in. It's a little weird, but I like it. Room for the bolt in the top there, the angle. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to keep going. Okay, and there's the completed product. I'm pretty happy with it. I think it's kind of weird, and I think that's the whole point of this cart. So those washers are pretty thick, probably a good, you know, 3.5 mil thick. So I don't have any problems worrying about the strength of them. I think it's going to work out. I think it'll look good. Next is to drill and to fit the stub axle assembly. Okay, so while I've got this upside down, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to build the little, I guess, sump, I guess you'd call it. We'll drill some holes in here, we'll make up the compensation plates, because as you know, vertical welds in a chassis will crack. That's why trucks chassis, you always see them on a 45 with a called a fish plate or a compensation plate over them. So when I do up the sump, which will just be out of the 150 by 50 50 by 25 that I use for the front axle, we'll then drill and tap the back of it and get a feel around it. But I've got to drill some holes in here first and make up the plates to make sure it doesn't want to crack. So let's bang on with that. Okay, so this being the sump for the fuel tank, this is the bung I'm going to have to drill out and tap. Obviously it's not going to be that long, but we're going to use a 1/8 British Standard pipe fitting when it's to drill that out, 1132. Let's get to go in here. So you can see how close that sort of sits. I'm probably going to have to drill and weld this first, cut this to size, drill and tap it, and then weld it in, and then weld the main sump in first. Otherwise, what's going to happen is I'm just going to have this horrible extension of weld around the top here. Yeah, and it just won't seal. It'll forever leak, and no fun for anyone. Okay, so we've drilled the pattern of holes, nicely chamfered. Obviously there's some crap in here we'll have to get out when we do the filler neck. That's the shape of the sump, and the sump just drops over the top like that. We can then weld and build the compensation plates that form part of this side here as well. So I'll get to work on that now. So these are the, sorry, they're the BSP fittings. This is the tap, just makes it through, so we'll do the whole thing and then we'll cut it in half and use the other side for other things, I guess. That's looking pretty good to me. I'm pretty happy with that. So that's my first time tapping as well. So if anyone can see any way I can improve that, it'd be very welcome to hear from you. But that goes in there beautifully. So now it's time to cut this in half and weld it to the sump. The sump is got the bung in there and it's all clamped into position. You can see those holes there that will fill this. So we'll weld this into place and then we'll make up the all-in-one, I guess, compensation plate that'll take both the side of the sump and this weld and wrap around the other face of this, the top face of this tank, in an effort to take the pressure off the corners as well.
Alright, so these are the plates as cut. We've radiused where they're going to fit, obviously on this side, but we've radiused where they're going to fit there. So when we weld them, we don't point load and give it a diaphragm issue on this wide face. So they'll just slot under here like that for the moment. And then we'll now weld all of those in place, and then we'll turn it over and we'll do the top, and you'll see the top and the way I'm going to pinch it down and give it a bit more of a 3D shape. Okay, so we're drilled out, we're ready to go. Obviously now we've got to put the bolts in and the springs and stuff. So putting the spring washer here under the head, this is going to go up. Bless me, because I'm trying to do this one-handed, so I might put the camera down. There we go. Okay, so like I said, the bolt goes up under here, put the spring on top. We then have the spindle, which I'm going to have to weld to, just sliding in here. Okay, still a bit tight through there, so I'll give it a whack. And then obviously we will put the washer and then the bolt on top. It all fits, it looks great, so yeah, time to get to it. Okay, so the spindles are in, they look great. There's heaps of movement. It doesn't want to move too much though, but it's loose enough in that it turns well enough, as you can probably see there. And it locks in nicely with the washer. We definitely needed this this bracing on the side here, because you can see it's already wanting to pull down a little bit. So I am glad I put that stuff in. Alright, so we've cut the end off a few bolts to size. We've welded them onto the stub axles, and now we need to put a tiny spacer in here to take the bearing as it pushes up against this, and also to space it off here a little bit as well. Leave room for the disc. So that's next. I've got a tiny little piece over here that I think I'm going to use. It seems to go on beautifully. So what I'll do is I think I'll just like put a little split in that. I'll give it a whack up. I'll weld this on as well, and then weld that to the axle when we cut it to size, and that should help strengthen that area up a little bit more as well. Okay, so here we are. I've just bolted this on just enough. You know, just with maybe one thread showing on that, which is probably the minimum you want. We can see the gap I've got to fill there with a spacer to rest against this sort of inner ring race here. We've got a good amount of turning circle. I mean, it goes all the way around without binding at all. I mean, that's a good drift angle, I guess, but this goes all the way around quite comfortably. So I dare say the brake mount and the steering arm will probably have to be one unit. That's going to be an interesting custom feat, but we'll get to that. Yes, I'm aware that this tyre belongs on that side of the tread pattern. This was just the one that I picked up. Yeah, but this is really encouraging because of the amount of articulation we've got on that without any binding at all. I mean, it's close. I mean, I could probably round that corner on this mount in here a little bit, but that's looking really good, and it all lines up beautifully. It seems to flow. Yeah, I'm happy. Let's keep going. Okay, so we're finally on all fours. There isn't as much caster as I was hoping with that front end, so I'm gonna have to work something out there. I'll live with it for the moment, but we might have to maybe section and lay them back slightly. This fuel tank has worked out well, and as you can see, plenty of clearance under there, with the bung at the rear, which is good. Compensation plates look good, and it's got a pretty mean little stance, so I'm pretty happy with it. Next we'll mount the motor, and we'll hook up the steering, because obviously the motor has to go in with the steering at the same time because they go around each other. So that'll be next video. We'll see you then.